Okay, I think in respect of everybody's time, we should probably get started. I'd just like to welcome everybody to this morning's webinar. My name's Aaron Newnham, and I'm here today on behalf of Convenience and Car Wash Canada. I'm here to sort of moderate the webinar and just make sure everything goes well from a technical standpoint. So today's webinar is the fourth in our in Convenience and Car Wash Canada's webinar series. And today's webinar is on the topic of how to leverage NRCAN funding to install EV charging stations at your business. So today with us we have Steve Wickens of ChargePoint, David Remy of ChargePoint, and Steve Herlick of ChargePoint. So I'm going to hand it over to Steve now, and we'll get the webinar started. So welcome, Steve, and thanks so much for being here today.
Great, Aaron. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody's having a great day. We're going to break this down into some few sections. At the end of each section, we'll have a time to have questions. So please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A section on the webinar, and we'll address those at kind of the end of each smaller section. So before we move on, so please feel free to ask any questions, and we'll make sure we go through everything. And we were going to start with kind of a EV 101, kind of just giving a background of the electric vehicle industry to get everybody kind of on the same page. Then we'll go through the NRCAN funding in particular and how that works, and then we'll finish with kind of how ChargePoint solution and how that works at fueling stations. So that's kind of our convenience stores, as this is kind of the focus of this group. And then again, we'll have another end of questions or set of questions at the end. So we'll start off with Stephen Wickens, who's account executive for the eastern part of Canada. Stephen, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. I appreciate everyone joining on the call today. As Steve mentioned, I'm the representative for Canada, or ChargePoint Canada, in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today. The first slide that we have on hand today is kind of a projection that the federal government of Canada is predicting over the next 15, 20 years. As you can see, by 2025, they're predicting about 10% of cars are going to be electric on the road. By 2030, 30%. By 2040, completely 100%. Obviously, this could be seen as a little aggressive by the federal government, but by any means, they're going to continue to roll out funding to help increase that adoption, and that's obviously what we're here to talk about today. And just to give you a decent idea of where we stand on those numbers today, BC is anywhere from 8% to 15% on any given quarter on new cars that are purchased. The province of Quebec sits around 10% as well. And both of those provinces have heavy incentives that help subsidize the cost of EV vehicles. And the province of Ontario sits around 3 to 5%. Ever since the incentives were pulled back. But by no means have we stopped seeing growth in that type of market. So EVs are well on their way, and it's no matter a question of if anymore, but a matter of when. So Aaron, next slide. Next slide. So I want to briefly take everyone through a little bit of an EV 101, kind of let people understand the differences between the different electric vehicles. Obviously, you have three different types. You have a hybrid, you have a plug-in hybrid, and you have a full battery electric. Two vehicles that need an actual plug to charge are your plug-in hybrid and your full battery electric. Obviously, the hybrid, the way the battery works in that is the engine is constantly recharging and charging that, and so it never actually has to be plugged in. Whereas a plug-in battery, it uses a combination of both gas and battery. So usually on those hybrids, you get anywhere from 30 kilometers up to 60 kilometers, and then it will transition itself over to the fuel. On a battery electric vehicle, you're using 100% battery energy, and it needs to plug in every time that it finishes its charge, and it can charge the distance from the cars can go anywhere from 200 kilometers all the way up to the new Tesla models that are up to the 700 kilometer range. So it's a wide range of different models going different distances, but battery technology is only going to continue to advance, allowing us to go farther and farther with these types of vehicles. Next slide. So these are the cars that are out in the marketplace today. Obviously, a lot of people always say, oh, there's not enough option out there. There's not enough option. Well, that's not really true, just because we do see around 15 fully battery electric vehicles that are in the market, with many more on the way. Next slide, Aaron. All different manufacturers are making commitments to transitioning their entire fleets over to electric. Obviously, Tesla is the one who's made this a sexy transition and completely move the needle in EVs. But that's not to say GM, Ford, Audi, Daimler, Hyundai, all these huge major manufacturers have all pledged that they're releasing models into the market, and they're going to be transitioning all of their vehicles over to electric in the coming years. And this gives you an idea of what's to come in the next 3 to 5 years. Next slide. And in 2020 specifically, we're going to see these models released. So obviously a lot of new vehicles that are going to be hitting the road. And something that's been holding Canada back for quite some time, I'd say, are the large SUVs or the trucks. So we are finally going to begin seeing those SUVs hit the markets with the Tesla Model Y, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Rivian truck and the Rivian SUV. So a lot of exciting vehicles that are coming to the market that are going to be really intriguing for Canadians to buy across the country. So we're finally going to see, and people are going to be having that conversation at the dinner table going, maybe we should really go test drive that new electric vehicle, because the ranges on those batteries, as I mentioned, are only getting longer and longer, getting into the 500, 600, 700 kilometer range. Next slide. So the difference between and where the market has come, the level 1 charging station is the biggest misconception. A lot of people think that's how you have to charge your vehicle. Realistically, this is kind of a last-ditch effort. It only puts around 7 kilometers back on your vehicle per hour. You plug into a simple outlet, and you would use this in a scenario where you're going up to the cottage for the weekend and you really have no other option. Or it's just this is your only and last resort of finding a charge in an isolated area. Realistically, 95% of charging happens at a level 2 station, which is that middle picture there. So you're going to see that installed in homes, in multi-residential buildings, at workplaces, and grocery stores and around the community. And that's going to be realistically put anywhere, depending on the car type, anywhere from 30 kilometers up to 50 kilometers. Depending on how powerful that level 2 station is. And then you have your DC fast charging station, which is what you would be installing on highway corridors. So long travel routes in Ontario, specifically on the 401 or anywhere along the Trans-Canada Highway, you're going to see these DC fast charging stations. And depending on the type of car, depending on the type of station, can put anywhere from 250 up to 400 kilometers of range back on your vehicle. So it's for quick stops. You're going to stop for a bite to eat, stretch your legs, plug your car in, and get back on the road as quickly as possible. Next slide. Truly, we see this gives you a great idea of where you should be installing the different types of charging stations. Level 2s are generally in a place where you're going to be stopping longer than 2 hours. So if you're going to be going to work, going to a place of business, going grocery shopping, anywhere where you're going to be sitting there for 2 hours and you can plug in your car and get anywhere from 50 to 100 kilometers back up on your vehicle, because it probably only took you, let's say 50 kilometers commute to that destination, that's where we install level 2 charging stations. DC fast charging stations are, like I mentioned earlier, are going to be those quick stops. So whether that's at a fast food restaurant, or if you have a diner inside your gas station or retail location, people are going to come in, buy their smokes, buy their lottery tickets, buy a quick drink or some snacks for the road. Quick stops, they can get a quick charge, get a quick 200, 300 kilometers back up on their vehicle, and continue on their way. That's where we're going to install DC fast charging stations. Next slide. So this is just an image of ChargePoint's products, obviously. So that level 2 on the left, as I just mentioned, long dwell times, workplace, hospitalities, your house, areas like that. And then your DC fast is going to be installed in your traditional fueling locations where you're traveling long distances. You may also see this in a fleet scenario, but majority of the time it's going to be along the highway corridors and in isolated areas. Next slide. So now I want to try to get into how the traditional, let's say from 10 years ago to what it is now. So ChargePoint came into the market and introduced network charging stations. The reason that's important is it allows drivers and your customers to be able to find our charging stations on a map. So if they're traveling long distances, and I don't know how many EV drivers we have on the call today, but the way EV drivers find fuel or electric fuel is they look on an app on their phone and they pick out that location and they travel to it. They have to do a lot more planning compared to a traditional gas-powered driver, just because you don't have the luxury of having a gas station on every corner. Electric vehicle charging stations are few and far between in comparison, and they're not always promoted as well as they should be. So that's why that app is important, and that's where we're getting into that network charging solution. So Aaron, if you want to go to the next slide. Network charging solution, and that's where ChargePoint kind of created. We created the software that makes that station run and operate. So we were founded in Silicon Valley over in Campbell, California, just out at San Jose, California. And we've expanded globally now with over 700 employees. This is our main core business, is EV charging station. This is what we live and breathe for. Next slide. And this one, next slide, really gives you a clear picture of where our stations are installed across North America. So we have over 110,000 charging stations across North America now, obviously a mixture between level 2 and DC fast charging, but we have the most stations out of any other company in the world. Why that's important to you is obviously you're buying into a fueling network that people are familiar with. When people drive EVs, they have the ChargePoint app on their phone. They find that station on their app, and they either reserve it or they go to it and they go fill up their car. And whether they're stopping for a bite to eat or going inside your store, that's how they're going to find their station. Next slide. This shows you the ChargePoint customer base that's in Canada today. So we own about 1/3 of the EV drivers in Canada. There's about 150,000 cars on the road, and 50,000 of those drivers are ChargePoint drivers who use our app on a regular basis. But there's a lot of customers out there that still just tap their credit card to charge their vehicle. So it's no different than pulling up to a fueling pump or your traditional gas station, where you can be a Petro member, or you don't have to be a Petro member and you can just tap your card and fill up your car. Next slide. So this is our portfolio of products. We have a solution for every type of business, every type of situation. We have a level 2 charging station for your single family home, your multi-unit residential home, your fleet, any fleet scenario. Then our CT4000 is used for any public facing charging. It has integrated cable management, LCD screens, so you can play promo videos. You can brand these stations any which way that you would like. And then we also have obviously a DC fast charging station, both the CP250 and then the Express Plus. So as technology begins to grow, we can grow and scale with your business, making it easy for you to plan for the future and be able to service any of the new cars that are coming into the market. So we try to make it as seamless as possible and really help you and partner with you when you go install these stations. Next slide. And how it all works is through the cloud. So everything is communicating as one. We own our software, we own our hardware, and we have a service O&M team that goes out and service these stations when they go down. Why that's important is because uptime is the utmost most important thing in this industry. If you have a station that's down and inoperable, EV drivers will never go back to it. You need a reliable station that's going to be running 24/7, 365, so you can service as many customers as possible. If your station ends up getting a bad name and it's down and out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, that's obviously bad for business. We want to make sure if in the small chance something happens, we get it back up and running. That's what our service team is there for. And it's proactively monitoring those stations through the cloud. And we have 150 sensors in every one of our stations, giving us 15-minute interval updates, letting us know if anything is wrong with the stations, does it need replacement parts, and if it does, we send those out to our team to get them replaced before an issue happens. The other important thing is the driver experience is always communicating to our stations as well. They can leave you tips, they can see where the stations, what you set your pricing at before they arrive, they can see whether the station is available or unavailable. So having that communication between your hardware, your software, and your service provider is very important, as they all work together and are integrated as one to give your drivers the best experience as possible. Next slide. This is an overview of what the app looks like. Obviously, the driver experience and ChargePoint's eyes is the most important thing. As I briefly mentioned, when the driver has a poor experience at your station, it has a huge role on whether they come back. We want to build brand loyalty. And the way to do that is to provide a great product that is guaranteed to be up and running as often as possible. So drivers are going to be able to find the stations on the app. They're going to see pictures, and they can use the navigation, whether it's Apple Maps, Google Maps, Waze, to get to the stations. When you Google charging stations in the Google search bar, ChargePoint pops up. And like I said, the drivers can leave you tips. They can see peak times of the day. And whether the station is going to be heavily used between the hours of 4 and 7 or when they're arriving on site. So it gives them a clear picture on how to get access to the station. And then they have a number of ways to pay for their charge, whether it's with their ChargePoint card, any major credit card, Amex, Visa, MasterCard, whatever it may be, Apple Pay, Google Pay. And we try to make that experience as easy as possible for those drivers and make it pretty seamless. Next slide. Obviously, our stations come with a number of different features. So you have a number of ways you can price your charging. We have energy management if you're coming to a head at your power capacity on site. We can create a load shed schedule. We can do a bunch of different access controls and pricing for possible memberships that you may have at your particular sites. We can integrate with APIs to different software platforms. So really, the power of ChargePoint is through the software capabilities, and we can do basically anything that you're looking to accomplish. And it's all there when you partner with ChargePoint. Next slide. This is a quick dashboard. So if you have a portfolio of properties across the country, this is a dashboard that you would have access to. It gives you a brief overview of how your stations are operating across the country, whether you have one in BC, one in Alberta, a location in Quebec, and you're going to get an overall picture of how your stations are operating, how many drivers are using it on a per day, per week, per month basis, how much power or energy you've used in that time span, your idle time of your drivers. So maybe we need to set policies to kick the drivers out more quickly so you have a higher turnover rate. And then obviously, if you do have environmental and sustainability goals, all that is labeled in the bottom of the screen for you with how many GHGs have you avoided, greenhouse gases have you avoided since installing your charging stations. So a lot of great information that you can use to obviously when you're going to deploy these stations at your properties. And I think that covers, and I want to leave it open real quickly because we have a lot to get through. Is there any questions on anything that I recently covered on EV 101 or ChargePoint as a whole?
Yeah, Steve,
this is a
Q&A session. Oh.
Yeah, I think we're going to tell them the same thing. So we have some questions that came in while you were talking. That was great. One of the first questions is, who sets the price per charge and what is the industry standard? And that's a question from Brenda. Can you answer that, please?
So when you're setting the station rate of charge, you have full control of the station. So you have the option, if you want to charge $1, $2, $3, you have full control of that. Industry standard at the moment, you're looking around, let's say $15 to $25, and it can range obviously on supply and demand. If you're the only station in the vicinity and in the area, obviously you have the flexibility to take advantage of that. And the nice thing about this is that you're able to adjust fairly quickly. Those tips that those drivers can leave you can let you know on if your pricing's too high. Oh, I'm never coming back here. The pricing's too high. You can adjust that same day if you feel that you're getting a lot of those comments. But we want to give you full control to be able to configure that any way that you want it.
Okay, next, another question was, who sets up and decides on the video advertising? So the site host has full control over the messaging and the videos on the screen. So you can leave it as a generic video that ChargePoint just kind of provides for EV charging, or you can upload your own videos that do your own advertising or your messages about, you know, visiting your C-store and other things like that. So that is that's completely up to the site host. And the other questions, I think we had a couple more around the pricing. So one thing to consider that's very interesting about EV charging is, as you guys I'm sure are very affected by it right now in the world, the price of electricity is very stable. Usually it doesn't vary on a daily basis. So you're able to change your price just like you do on your gas on a basis whenever you would like, daily, monthly, weekly. But the incoming cost of fuel from the utility is usually very steady. So it's really hard for them to change their electricity prices. So you have a very good idea what your costs will be going in. Let's see. Okay, this is another. Go ahead, David.
Sorry. Yeah. So further to what the Steves, I guess, are mentioning about the flexibility to charge the drivers for using the stations, you have it's full dynamic pricing controls. So it can be set per hour, per minute, per session. That rate can change over time. It can change based on the driver. If you're setting up something like our connections functionality, where someone is associating their ChargePoint account with a Chevron account or a PetroPoints account or a co-op account, something like that, they can get registered as a preferred user of your charging stations because they're a member of your fueling rewards as well, and that person can get a special rate. So in terms of what you're charging the drivers, if you want it to be cheaper in the evenings and more expensive during peak hours, if let's say you live in an area where your utility charges you, time of day, different fees for different times of day, your charge to the customers can reflect that cost as well. And then one quick thing I'll talk about is the ability to charge per kilowatt hour. So for right now, there is no certification through Measurement Canada for a revenue grade meter in EV chargers. So while our embedded meters are revenue grade throughout the US, they aren't in Canada because that protocol isn't set up yet. As soon as that protocol gets established, then we will work to get our station certified as soon as possible. But as of right now, you only have the ability to charge per minute or per hour through the native meters in the stations. I hear, yeah, so someone's asking, we have different rates for hydro throughout the day, so come after 7 and pay less. That's exactly the type of functionality that our stations can support. Someone else just asked, are all the different types of chargers based on the vehicle manufacturers, are they all compatible? Great question. Currently, there's still sort of a VHS Betamax battle happening within the fast charging world anyways. Level 2 charging, so the slower type of charging that Steve mentioned, that is standardized with what's called a J1772 port. That's an SAE standard protocol. However, for fast chargers, there's still 2 competing standards, which is CHAdeMO and CCS combo is what they're known as. And in order to allow vehicles to charge regardless of which protocol they're on, our own and many fast chargers have 2 ports. As you may have noticed, there are 2 ports in our fast charger. That's not for 2 vehicles to charge simultaneously. That's to have the ability to charge either of those 2 charging protocols, CCS or combo.
And one more point, those are usually separated by where the vehicle is manufactured. So North American manufacturers, European manufacturers use the CCS combo, whereas Asian manufacturers like Mitsubishi, Toyota, Honda are using the CHAdeMO connector. Eventually, as David said and alluded to, there will be a standard that gets put in place. It's just a matter of when, and we will include that standard on our stations. Just for now, we include both while they're both readily available.
And I guess one more point to be made in that conversation is that Tesla is the only manufacturer that has a proprietary charging protocol. So for level 2s, they are required to include a J1772 adapter in their vehicles when they sell them, as that is the standard that's been established. So for level 2, the Tesla vehicles can all use our stations. When it comes to level 3, they require a aftermarket adapter that the driver has to purchase in order to use non-Tesla fast chargers.
Okay, great. I think there was one other question that we might be able to address in a later section, but what is recovery time to cost? And then what is my cost for number 3?
For level 3, I believe.
Level 3. God, okay, no, okay. Okay, so I think we'll cover some of those topics as we go on. I think David right now is going to kind of speak to the NRCAN grant funding opportunity and what is involved with that, because that's kind of a hot topic right now. So David, please take it away, and we'll have another section for questions right after this spot.
Yeah, appreciate that, Steve. So hi, everybody. My name is David Rahimi. I'm stationed here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I cover British Columbia and Alberta for the company. I've been at ChargePoint for 3 years now, and I'm sure this is a topic that everyone's very interested to hear about, government funding around EV charging. National Resources Canada has taken it upon themselves to help subsidize a trans-Canadian network of EV chargers. The concept there being that someone can drive from Vancouver to Quebec and be able to charge their vehicle along the entire route. So I'll discuss the various aspects of the grant, and any sort of questions that you may have, please feel free to ask them. ChargePoint works very closely with organizations like NRCAN and other organizations who issue these types of grants. We have a dedicated grants department within ChargePoint that specializes in learning and about these grants and helping our customers apply for it. So this is definitely something that our expertise lends itself to. Next slide, please, Aaron. So the grant is called the Electric Vehicle and Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Deployment Grant, EVAFID for short, because that is a very long title. You can also call it EVID, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Deployment Grant. We're currently in the 3rd out of the 4 phases that have been committed to for this funding. The previous 2 rounds awarded approximately $30 million to fast charger projects across Canada. That's still only a small portion of the total funding that was dedicated to this program when they initially came out with it. So there's still a lot of funding available, and the program goal is far from being met as well. They want to install 900 fast charging stations from coast to coast in Canada. So needless to say, NRCAN is very motivated to help enable the appropriate types of projects by issuing this funding. So but however, they do have program emphasis. They do have merit criteria. So if you look online, you'll see that they are very explicit about the fact that they want to use this funding to help enable a trans-Canadian network of EV fast chargers, like I said. So if the location where you're thinking of implementing a charger lends itself to that goal, it's very high likelihood of your project being accepted. So this merit criteria that I mentioned include things like co-location with other fuel types, which a lot of you on the call do satisfy that criteria. Also, close proximity to major routes and filling gaps in EV charging infrastructure, especially in rural and First Nations communities, are all high priorities for this funding. Next. The funding levels are up to 50% or $50,000 per charger per project. So as you'll see in the next slide, the installation and the equipment costs are eligible expenses. So as long as that doesn't exceed $100,000 in terms of the total project cost, then it'll be a 50% subsidy. You're also able to co-locate slower chargers, so level 2 chargers with your fast charger implementations. This is often a good idea for a few reasons. Redundancy, so if for some reason there's an issue with the charger, or let's say there's a lineup and someone's in dire need, you have the ability to charge in the level 2 charger. Another reason is because not all vehicles can take a fast charge. A lot of the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are only take a level 2 charge, so co-locating with level 2 is always a great idea. And then also, in terms of topping up the charge for your vehicle, a fast charger starts to taper off as it gets to the upper maximums of your overall battery range. So let's say once you get to 80 or 90%, the speed of charge will really decrease. We actually don't recommend fast charging beyond 80% of your battery's capacity. So that's the point at which someone can hop off of the level 3 charge and then top up their range with a level 2 charge. So always a idea to co-locate with level 2, and luckily the funding allows you for a subsidy for those chargers as well. Now, a very important fact is that in British Columbia, there's an additional 25% subsidy for the fast chargers available through the province. So now in British Columbia, not only it's not just a 50% subsidy on equipment and install costs, it's 75% subsidy. So a project that would otherwise cost $100,000 is only costing 25 grand. Next. I alluded to it earlier, but there are more eligible costs than just equipment and infrastructure. So not only are there chargers, the install costs, the panels, the breakers, the costs for trenching, and any other type of retrofit activities that are required. Those are all covered, but as you see here, things like salary and benefits, travel costs, equipment rental fees are all eligible expenses as well. Next. So the deadline for submitting your applications is July 23rd. So these documents are available online. You would complete the documents and you need to submit them by that date. Once you submit the application, there's a review period between August and September. They're aiming for October release of the responses of who was successful and who wasn't. That's always arranged. So whether I would call it the fall time or early winter to hear back on the status of your application. And then once you receive a conditional approval, then you enter into negotiations with National Resources Canada to firm up the contribution agreement. That's a very important point to keep in mind, because that is the first time that you're entering into a mutually negotiated commitment. Up until then, so the submission of the application, the entire process of getting to a conditional approval, you haven't made any commitments there at that point. So something to keep in mind, as I know a lot of people really can't wrap their heads around committing additional funding to a project that may not have already been budgeted. You don't have to figure that out right now. Once the conditional approval comes and things, you probably have a bit more certainty come the end of the year in terms of your financial situation, that's when you can decide if you want to continue to proceed or if you want to adjust the scope. That's when you would have those negotiations with National Resources Canada. Once you've decided on how you'd like to proceed, you have 24 months, so 2 years, from when you receive your conditional approval to complete the project. So allows for a lot of flexibility for projects that are just beginning now or just in the engineering phase, that are not going to be completed for a while yet. They still actually qualify for this funding. Next. So how do you submit this application? Like I said, you need to submit the forms that are available online through the email that they've indicated. There's an application package that you can download as well. There are a few accompanying documents that you have to include, but ultimately it's not an extremely intensive exercise, especially if you consider working with ChargePoint. We'll help you with every step of the application process. We do have some templated materials that we can provide you to help ease the administrative burden of applying, and we'll be with you with every step of the way. So please don't hesitate to reach out if this is something you're interested in. I think our contact information is included somewhere. So yeah, it's definitely a very lucrative grant, a great opportunity to be able to work on a project that may be inevitable. EVs are coming. Everybody knows it. It's not a matter of if, but when. So if you visualize your property providing EV charging to its customers or stakeholders, might as well do it when there's the ability to get some government funding for it. So I believe that's all I have for slides. So let's see if there are any questions here. Are we able to work with generator power like on ferries or transport crossing downtime? Good question. So I believe what you're alluding to is having chargers on a ferry. I'm not too versed on the engineering aspect of the electrical capacity on ferries, but ultimately it comes down to electrical capacity. So our level 2 chargers, for example, use 40 amps at 240 volts. Our level 3 chargers take 480 volt 3-phase power, which I understand is an unusual power capacity in most applications. I know some gas stations have it because of their car washes that they have to power or any other additional heavy equipment. But yeah, it all depends on what type of power is available. Rural hydro outages, that's kind of out of our control. When there is no power, that's unless there's a battery being connected or some sort of backup energy. Again, it comes down to the power being available. That doesn't really have to do with the technology of the stations at all. Snow issues, that's a great question. Our equipment is rated to -40, and even in colder temperatures, we've had tests that show that they're still operational. We have taken cold temperatures into account in a lot of our development of our technology. So all of our touch screens, for example, are pressure sensitive, not finger sensitive. So you're able to use them with gloves on, for example. Our CP250, which I'm going to talk about for a bit in a bit, took some of those considerations into account in its design as well. But yeah, in the rural conditions, like we have stations in Anchorage, Alaska, in Juneau, Alaska, in Fort St. John, in Fort McMurray, in northern Alberta. Our stations are tried and tested in very intense cold scenarios, and we actually, I'll be speaking about our testing behaviors in a bit as well, but we heavily and significantly stress test our stations during the development phase in these types of conditions as well.
And I think there was a really good question. I'm sorry, Dave. I think there's a really good question about it. It asked what is the actual cost of versus what the grant will cover for a location. And I think it was asked, can you break it down very simply for us? Unfortunately, that answer is a little bit harder to come by quickly because the cost of construction and installation is such a big variable. So that is very site specific, what it actually will cost and how much the government will subsidize. So I'll try to get into that a little bit in my part of the presentation, but the there's fixed costs for the charging stations and network fees, but the actual installation can vary dramatically from site to site. So it is very reliant on a site walk and an evaluation of your location to tell you the exact numbers. Is there any other questions that came in?
Yeah, I see a couple more questions here. Well, how do I get in ChargePoint? Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, I believe. So stay tuned for that. I can respond there and give you some contact information as well. Do the units have a canopy? About direct sunlight? Good question. No, direct sunlight does not affect our unit. We've actually used to have an issue with our vinyl inserts getting bleached by the sun, and we've even gone in and changed the material that our branding is printed on. So no issues there in terms of the direct sunlight. Are there monthly fees? Great question. Steve Herlick, are you going to be covering that at all, or should I mention it?
You can mention it. You can kind of go through how our system works, how the network works.
Yeah, sure. So yes, there are monthly fees. They can be paid up front at a discount, but essentially on a monthly basis, we have to ensure the connectivity of the station. We have to continue to provide services like support, supporting our 1-800 driver support number that's on the station, all the different updates and upgrades that you're continuously getting. So there is a contract with ChargePoint that needs to exist on an ongoing basis, and we can sort of optimize the package that you receive based on what your needs are, and we can do it up front. We can purchase up to 5 years up front, or we can go on an annual basis in terms of the renewal.
And I think we got one last question came in here. Says, do the units have a high-speed internet? So all of our stations do not connect to local Wi-Fi or a wired internet service. Everything is through a cellular cloud connection. And that way they are designed to kind of operate on their own regardless of the existing location. So there is a requirement that you do have a cellular connection at the location, but we have the ability to test to make sure you have a strong enough data connection for that. So I think there's only a very, very few number of places that we have not been able to have a strong connection. And I think, and again, there's one last question on the type of power. So the DC fast stations take 480 volt three-phase power. If your property does not have 480 volt three-phase power, we just basically do a conversion before the charging station. We do it with a step-up or step-down transformer. The main requirement for DC fast charging is three-phase power. So again, as part of the kind of site evaluation, we're able to confirm your type of power and your capacity. And part of the project might be to do a utility upgrade or a utility conversion, but that again can be determined kind of after a site walk. Or if you know what type of power you have, you can always give us that data ahead of time, but we don't expect anybody to go open switch gears or confirm transformers. So Aaron, I think we can go on to the next section. So I think this is kind of, hopefully we'll kind of bring everything together. So my name is Steve Herlick. I'm the channel manager for fueling and convenience. So everything I do for ChargePoint revolves around gas stations. And so I've been working on the DC fast solution for gas stations for a long time, and I've done quite a few installations across the country in locations in Canada. And so the main question, I was seeing some of the questions come in, is kind of what is the business case for EV charging, especially at a gas station. So this is on the newer scale, like David and Steven had kind of referred to. ChargePoint's been around for 13 years. We've been around one of the longest EV companies. But what has happened recently is the more and more DC charging capable cars. The first EVs came out, they were only level 2 or level 1, but every new model, they're starting to add more DC fast. And so what DC fast allows you to do is actually have it at a shorter dwell time business. And what perfect location is where other fueling is. Humans are, creatures of habit, and we get used to, kind of our routines. And if we're used to getting our fuel at a gas station, then that is very comfortable position for them to transition. They might want an EV, but they're used to getting their fueling at that location. And so we kind of look at some different things. The main factors that we consider, and we'll go through this with you, and again, I keep bringing this up, but it is on a site-by-site basis because each one of these has some variables. You have the actual charging equipment cost, the hardware, software. You have the installation cost, which is the biggest variable, so that determines if you have enough power, what your kind of site layout is, how long is the run from your utility panel to where you want your charging stations. Do you have to trench in concrete or asphalt or landscaping? You know, so it's the civil component of construction. And then, you know, how short of runs you make depends on it. Is it new construction or is it a retrofit? Are you planning this in with a new building, or are you tearing up your existing parking lot to put these in? And then the third cost is operating cost. So the cost of your electricity and the cost of your maintenance. And then after that, you determine what your revenue is. So just like every other business decision, we want to look at all your costs and compare it to your potential revenue and over the period of time. And then in particular with this program that's coming out right now, you know, how much does the NRCAN grant help with this and improve that ROI calculation? So next slide, please. So kind of the solution, I think we touched on it multiple times, but what is perfect for the NRCAN, especially for gas stations, is our CP250 DC fast station. It's a 62.5 kilowatt output, which can be paired together. So if you install two simultaneously, they can actually share power, which improves redundancy, but also allows for higher power to an individual vehicle. So this is really important when it comes to your operation costs, because what you want to do is you want to keep your cost of your electricity down, your demand charges from utility demand down, but also provide the most power you can to your customer. The other very exciting thing about this product in terms of a gas station installation is its very small footprint. So everything that you see right there in that picture, and although that doesn't give you scale, it's smaller than a traditional gas pump, and that includes all power conversion and everything else. So you don't need large cabinets around the corner to do the power conversion. Everything is in this small footprint, and it's easily retrofittable to the existing parking lot spaces at your facility. Next slide, please. As you can see, anything that was orange on the main charging station is brandable. So you can change the skins to have your brand, to advertise your C-store, to advertise anything you would like, so that way you can have your brand recognition for your customer. They'll know that's ChargePoint from the top, from the shape of the station, but we want you. ChargePoint's business model is for you to be the business, right? This is just like a gas pump. It's an amenity that you provide to your customers, but you're running your own business. And so you're fully in control of the charging station. Like we've talked about before, you set the pricing, you control the experience of your customers. They are your customers, and we are just helping you support them. And then the way we do that, and I go into that, the 24-hour driver support is really, really important, because it is hands-off for your attendants or your employees at the locations. Your attendants or employees should not have to help drivers with these stations. They are very intuitive, and if they have any problems or questions, our 24-hour support line, which is based in Scottsdale, Arizona, so they are somewhat local, at least a lot of times on the same, you know, there's always somebody available. They can remotely start a session. They can help them with any kind of issues they might be having, and they're as simple as, it's usually an early driver just has never done it before. And I'm guessing you guys still get this every once in a while. Someone asks you how to actually pump gas, right? It's kind of ridiculous, but people still, not everyone knows. And so we have very much built our system around this adoption in order to make it very easy. It's very easy for the driver, and it's very easy for the site host. And that includes all payment, you know, kind of collection, everything else. Everything is collected remotely and deposited directly into your bank account. So we don't even need any transactions. We don't need any connections to your point of sale or any other kind of confusing components. All the transactions are handled securely remotely through our cloud and deposited in your bank account. All right. Next slide, please. So again, this is just kind of showing the flexibility in our stations on the modularity. So you can do a single station, or you can pair them, so that way you can get increased power again with keeping your electrical costs and your infrastructure costs low. We try really hard not to engage the utilities if we don't have to, because bringing in new utility service is tricky. Although if your facility needs that, we are very well versed in that. We can help you along that whole process. So again, the idea that you can have multiple solutions, finding the best solution for your business. Next slide, please. One of the really interesting things or great things about the ChargePoint product and our company in general is that we are fully vertically integrated. So we're one of the only companies that does the hardware, makes our own hardware, writes our own software, has our own support services, has our own construction services, and everything is integrated under one roof. And what that allows us to do is build really great products that always work. So one of the things that we really focused on with our DC Fast is its serviceability. Once EV charging became, a standard fuel, it needs to behave like a standard fuel. You cannot have downtime. I mean, imagine all of your gas pumps not working at one time. That experience, I think it was mentioned earlier, completely ruins the experience. Nobody buys more EVs, and so you need it. They're, mission critical. If someone's driving a fleet vehicle or a delivery vehicle, it's mission critical that they can get their fuel. So in the DC fast charger, our CP250, we have 9 replaceable parts. So 6 screws can take the entire thing apart and have 9 replaceable parts that can be swapped out in under an hour. It can be on our O&M partner's truck. And we have O&M partners for our operation and maintenance conveniently located across Canada. So we always have somebody nearby that can come work on your station. We have a 24-hour, kind of window that they can respond. But we also, with our remote monitoring, we know what might be wrong before they get there. We might know what's wrong before a customer would know what's wrong, or even you guys might know what's wrong, and we can have the part and we can have it replaced before there's an issue. And so everything is designed to be easy, which is a big difference compared to some other hardware on the market where there's thousands, hundreds of PCB boards and wires and confusion where it's really hard to diagnose what's going on. We spent a lot of effort with our engineers who are in-house to be able to figure out how to make this easy to maintain and repair. And one of the things I jumped out because there was a snow question. We don't have any vents or fans or any open parts, I think, below 20 inches on the station. So even it's not the highest snow drift, but we even took that into account, so no vents can get blocked even with snow around the station. So you can kind of see where our first vent is pretty high up, whereas other stations, we learned from that from other hardware that those things can get clogged, and so we took that into account when we designed our stations for all applications. Next slide, please. So as I was speaking to, we have a lot of experience in the actual design and construction of the sites. So if you decide this might be something that you're interested in, we can do a site evaluation. We can work with your contractor that you're familiar with. We can suggest a local contractor or construction firm or engineering to find out the best way to design it for your site, which again is either future-proof, so you can design for now, and then also for additional stations when the industry grows. We can help you coordinate with the utility, so you guys don't have to, because again, that can be a pain point. And also, we try to do it the most cost-effective way. So to have the ROI and the profitability of EV charging, the less money you can put in up front, the more profit you can make on the back end. And so we take all those into account while we're helping you design your location. Next slide, please. And so we don't have enough time on this call because we're almost up to our hour already, but just kind of showing you we have advanced modeling capabilities since we have been doing this longer than anybody else, and we have the most installed stations. We have the most data. Every charging session that takes place, we collect the data. And so we can make very well-educated kind of estimates on your location, what the estimated utilization will be, which we put into our models with the cost and your utility costs, and tell you, if you have a portfolio, which one of your sites might be better or when you should install EV charging based on the number of cars that are coming and the utilization in the area, the number of drivers we have in the area, and all the inputs to make a very educated decision on if EV charging is right for you. So although I can't go through this with you today, this is what we can offer you if you're considering this. We can help you run through the numbers and make that true business decision. Next slide, please. So I ran through that quick because we only have about 5 minutes left. Let me check the questions. I don't know if Stephen or David saw any come in that jumped out at them.
Dwayne asked a great question about a receipt. I'll let you take it, Herlick. Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, everything in the ChargePoint system is designed for kind of ease. So all your charging activity, if you are the ChargePoint driver, gets recorded in your account. So it's very similar to how you kind of interact with an Uber or Lyft. You have a credit card on file. You don't actually have to do a transaction at the station, but it also records all your energy consumption. So you have a very nice kind of, history of your charging. It even would track your home charger, so you know exactly how much energy you use and what you paid for it. So basically, it's a digital receipt. Another question here is who pays for the repairs? So as part of our warranty program, the Assure program, which is coverable by most grants, it's if you have the warranty program, it is labor and parts are included. If you choose to go as this parts only, you can do your own, kind of have your own system for that. But we've designed it with our Assure program. You basically pay for everything up front, and then it's worry-free. We take care of all the repairs. Let's see here. Okay, so the other question is, are the presentation materials available? So yes, I believe this presentation will be posted to the Convenience and Car Wash website upon conclusion. We can go to the next slide, please. So here is Stephen and David's contact information. So please feel free to reach out to them directly. Kind of, we have multiple account executives in Canada, but these are kind of, we break it, in sections. Mostly for time zone compatibility. But please feel free to reach out to your local rep. That way they can help you with all this. I can also get involved with our fueling channel partners that can help do with site walks and again, like the site evaluations. So we'll leave that up so our contact information is on there as long as possible. So there's, again, another question that keeps coming up, and again, it's sometimes hard to answer. What's the average time to charge? What's the average cost to charge? So in the last 2 minutes, I'll quickly try to touch on this topic. So like a gas car that has different sized gas tanks, like it takes my Silverado with a 25-gallon tank longer to fill up than a smaller vehicle. So electric vehicles have different sized batteries, but not only do they have different sized batteries, they have different battery management systems, and so each brand has a little bit different secret sauce on how they intake the electricity. So a lot of times they will say time to fill up to 80%. What I have as actual, so if you were to fill a battery to full, even on a DC fast charger, it can take 45 minutes to an hour. What actually takes place at a gas station in the real world is depending on the location. So neighborhood gas stations that are in more urban or suburban locations have an average dwell time of 22 minutes. So, and that is across the board, all of my gas station installations. And so what that means is they don't actually fill up the full. Because they know they have an option for a DC fast nearby, they will get what they need and be more of a top-off model. So they'll get 10 minutes here, they'll get 30 minutes here, they'll get 15 minutes here when they're near the gas station. What that also means is they visit the store much more often than a traditional gas customer. So on average, my EV drivers will visit a location, especially if they're loyal to that location, 2 to 3 times a week for about, give or take, 20 minutes. Now, if your gas station is a corridor location where your main customer base is long distance travel, those dynamics change a little bit. It's more closer to a full fill up, and they're probably there 45 to 55 minutes. And they won't come back as often because it's more of a long-term drive. So it all depends on the location and the vehicles on how long it takes for them to fill up, and also what the actual charge is to fill up. Again, it depends on how much electricity you take, depends on the average fill-up cost. The average fill-up cost probably averages somewhere between $10 and $20 based on what the location and how much of the battery they're filling up. I'm just trying to see if there's any more questions. I think most of them kind of more questions around cost. So please reach out. I think we're over time here, Aaron. I don't want to overrun. I'm not sure how the system, if it just shuts off or whatnot. So please feel free to reach out to David or Stephen.
We're okay. If there's questions that you need to answer, we can do that.
Yeah, if it's specific questions about the cost, we can go through that with you directly. If you contact us and provide an address, we can do some real quick back of the napkin calculations and help you with that. I hate to say the wrong number on the presentation and be held to it. So I'd rather look at your specific location.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. So for everyone who's on here, I think it's been mentioned already, but the webinar and all the contact details for David and Stephen and Steve will be on the Convenience and Car Wash website as well. So you'll have the ability to come back and go through this and connect with these guys at any point that you like.
All right, well, great. Aaron, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time. I look forward to working with every one of you individually, and we will help you as best we can to take advantage of this NRCAN grant.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that great presentation today. I certainly learned a lot, and yeah, hopefully we'll be seeing some more ChargePoint stations around soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.